I'm very disappointed in the Vice President's comments. I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I've worked for the past 5 administrations, and either the Vice President is willfully mischaracterizing this President's position, both in terms of the language he uses and the actions he's taken, or he's ignorant of the facts. And in either case, it doesn't speak well of what the Vice President is doing. I would not have come back into this government if I felt that this President was not committed to prosecuting this war against al-Qaeda. And every day I see it in the President's face, I see it in the actions he's taken, and so I'm confident that this country is in fact protected by this President's position on al-Qaeda and against terrorist activities. We're going to continue to do this. We're going to do it hard. We're going to do it constantly.
Well, I can't think of a better blocking back than this guy. He came out strong, Gene, and I think he's made a very good bipartisan, nonpartisan case against Cheney's yapping.
Well, he did, and I just thought Cheney's statement to Politico last week was way off the reservation, included criticism of President Obama for handling the case of the attempted underwear bomber in federal court exactly the same way that Cheney and Bush handled the case of the shoe bomber in federal court. He's now in a federal prison. So the criticism itself just didn't make any sense, except as just kind of an ad hominem crazy attack.
You know, Michael, the same point can be made that President Bush at the time took 6 days to respond to that shoe bomber, and nobody was keeping a clock on him. This time, Cheney came out 6 days later, but 2 days after the President had already spoken, attacking him for not having spoken sooner, when he spoke 2 days before Cheney did, which was about the time, well, Cheney was keeping time with the way Bush used to do it, 6 days late. How come they keep coming up with different scorecards, Cheney, for Republicans and Democrats? By their own scorecard, they get zeros.
Your reference of President Bush's name. Your reference of President Bush's name, I think, makes a significant point. Look at the dichotomy between Bush's silence and Cheney's constant carping against this administration. Chris, I reached out for H.W. Brands, the presidential historian, because I wanted to know who is more in line with their predecessors, and clearly the answer is George W. Bush by his silence, the exception being if a vice president holds a desire to run for the highest office. I don't get that from Dick Cheney. So here's the question I ask. What is his motivation? Is his motivation to right the ship as he sees it? I don't think so. Or is it just to tear down the commander-in-chief? And my big objection is not so much the substance as it is the timing. I mean, how about the fact that here was President Obama, after he was reviewing the situation for Afghanistan, according to Dick Cheney, that was dithering. But when he's finally ready to go to West Point and make known a war plan, the vice president gives 90 minutes to Politico to cut out his knees from under him. I thought that was appalling. I thought that was offensive. And if the roles had been reversed, you can imagine the hue and cry from the GOP.
You would think that a guy who had run an operation where his chief of staff was hit for 5 felony counts and convictions, that he wouldn't be talking so much. Here's President Obama, by the way, on December 28th, just 2 days after, actually 2 days before Cheney's attack, actually getting well ahead of him. Here's the president.
A full investigation has been launched into this attempted act of terrorism, and we will not rest until we find all who were involved and hold them accountable. We do not yet have all the answers about this latest attempt, but those who would slaughter innocent men, women, and children must know that the United States will do more than simply strengthen our defenses. We will continue to use every element of our national power to disrupt, to dismantle, and defeat the violent extremists who threaten us, whether they are from Afghanistan or Pakistan, Yemen or Somalia, or anywhere where they are plotting attacks against the U.S. homeland.
You had John Brennan, a civil servant the other day, who risked his life over in Saudi Arabia, a station chief all those years, Michael, and coming out and saying the president he works with every day shows tremendous zeal in trying to track down the enemy and fight the al-Qaeda we're fighting. And it's said so many times. What gets to me is that Dick Cheney has attacked the president for wanting to try this guy in court and letting him have a lawyer, when that's exactly, as Gene points out, exactly what the Bush administration did with the shoe bomber. They allowed him to defend himself in criminal court. They allowed him to lawyer up, if you will. And now they're attacking Obama for doing the identical thing.
I think that the complaint that Cheney raised in that incident, former Vice President Cheney, because I do respect the man, again, the timing of it, not only was it unfounded based on the facts, but what was the purpose in him almost beating the President of the United States to the punch in addressing this subject? Chris, it was to malign the President and to make sure that the ship can't be righted if it is out of alignment. And that's what I object to the most. I mean, at what point are we no longer Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, but instead Americans under siege in this country?
Well, here's another theory, that this is not rational, that this is not thought out,
you think he is a troll?
Well, no, that in fact, frankly, the paranoia that some people sense in Dick Cheney, and the sense that under every rug and under every bed and around every corner is a potential terrorist holocaust, that this is internalized, that this is real, and that he's not seeing the situation as clearly as possible. That's one theory.
Well, here he was last week. I quote, this is Dick Cheney. He's amazing. The quote, it seems that President Obama seems to think that if he gives terrorists the rights of Americans, lets them lawyer up and reads them their Miranda rights, we won't be at war. He seems to think that if we bring the mastermind of September 11th to New York, give him a trial and a lawyer in civilian court, we won't be at war. He seems to think that if he closes Guantanamo and releases the hardcore al-Qaeda trained terrorists still there, we won't be at war. Here again, he's completely caught flat-footed. Michael, it was the past administration that released those two guys to Yemen that were the controls for this guy that was on a plane the other day from Nigeria. They had no sense of guilt or shame when they're the ones caught here. It wasn't this president that released al-Qaeda to cause this damage to us, almost damage. By the way, here's Jim DeMint, who seems to be learning how to synchronize swim with the former vice president. I don't know where well, clearly he's just using the guy's words. Here he is on CNN on Sunday. This is Jim DeMint of South Carolina.
If we had treated the Christmas Day bomber as a terrorist, he would have immediately been interrogated military style rather than given the rights of an American in lawyers. We've probably lost valuable information. It does come down to a decision of whether or not this is an act of war, an act of terror, or just a criminal act. So there's some real implications of the direction that's being taken now. I agree with Senator McCaskill. We need to take the politics out of this. But there's no question that the president has downplayed the risk of terror since he took office.
What do you make of that?
Well, I just think objectively it's not true, number one. Number two, I think you could have a civilized discussion about whether Abdul Muttalib should have been treated and dealt with in a military tribunal or not.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that. I don't think he should have gotten it. I think he should have gotten a military tribunal.
Well, but our editorial page looked at that and came to the conclusion that this was the right way to handle it. That in fact he was talking. He's already given up his handlers. He's given up the whole operation. That there was no reason to send him the military tribunal route. But the point is, of course, that's not the kind of civilized discussion that's being had with reference to what's been done in the past, with reference to the merits of the case. It's just a kind of inchoate yawp at this administration.
Their main point, Michael, seems to be they'll use these technical arguments, whether we go to a military court or we go to a civilian court, to make their larger point, which is that the President of the United States doesn't care about defending us, who doesn't believe we're under threat from al-Qaeda. And they say he never says the word terror. Well, here he is at his inauguration, beginning his administration. Let's listen to President Obama about a year ago.
We will not apologize for our way of life, nor will we waver in its defense. And for those who seek to advance their aims by inducing terror and slaughtering innocents, we say to you now that our spirit is stronger and cannot be broken. You cannot outlast us, and we will defeat you.
Well, Michael, that's a pretty good cri de guerre.
Listen, not only was that offering, I think, right on point, but so too was the president's inaugural radio address, for 2010. And he said all the right things, at least in my view, on Saturday in the radio address. And Chris, how about the speech that he offered at West Point when there was deafening silence from the right? And please don't think that I'm buying into all ways in which the Obama administration is fighting what I still regard as a war against terrorists. But I think that this criticism is not only unfounded, but ill-timed. And my bigger criticism is that it's ill-timed, and it seeks to undercut the commander-in-chief.
And I think that this president knows that it's a war against al-Qaeda, in particular, not against a tactic of war like terrorism. It's against a group of people trying to kill us. And by the way, as you pointed out to your credit for 8 years or 9 years now, they haven't caught bin Laden. He is the leader of al-Qaeda. They haven't caught Omar, what's his name, Mullah Omar. They haven't caught any of those people they went over there to get. So to brag about how these guys aren't measuring up to their standards is insane. Anyway, thank you. It's also shameless. Thank you, Eugene Robinson. The troll is out. And Michael Smercani, thank you, gentlemen.